Up next, we'd love to welcome Yufei to talk about sustainability and measuring impact with public goods as well.
Hi, folks. Nice to see you today. So I'm trying to make this session more like a talk show and not like a speech. And I'm trying to doing some roasting on the public goods since I've already found a lot of fun facts on this topic. So let's get started. Thanks so much for Nico for mentioning GCC in the first place. So as a normal startup, I would like first to introduce what GCC is. So basically, our full name is like Global Chinese Community for Digital Commons. We don't really quite use the word public goods anymore because we found that the concept public goods is more vague and it's just like can cover so many things. So from our name, you can see that we are more focused on the digital commons. Primarily the open source communities, open source projects, and some open source like intellectual properties. That's what we are. When we are introducing ourselves as GCC, it's always confusing because it's also the name of a compiler, but we are just not the compiler GCC, but the public goods funding or the open source funding GCC. Just use one sentence to describe what we're doing. We're just basically sending money to the public goods projects we believe in, and especially for those are built by Chinese and Asian. So that's our primary goal, and that's our primary motto. So in the second part, I'm gonna walk through some of the things we have done, some of the projects we have donated to already. The first one is Gitcoin Asian Run. In the past GG21, I think, we have donated to multiple projects, including ETHKL, and some of the other interesting projects you can see on our Twitter for more details. Also donated to the Summer of Prodigals. I think this is a really fun part because the Summer of Prodigals happening in the past summer. We actually have collected like 70 plus high quality applications, and some of those proposals are accepted to the main program. And we have sent like over 70K USD to the entire application. In the coming DevCon, we will have a SOP week, the protocol week, which will demonstrating our efforts in the SOP at Edge City. So if you're interested, so you can check out on our Twitter to see what's going on there. And we also have this program supporting EPF permissionless developers. So basically, EPF is like a program that that is funded by the EF, and for each summer you have projects, and you can ask a student or a developer to collaborate with a mentor and complete a milestone in the Ethereum Foundation. We also have a lot of traveler scholarships. So if you are going to DevCon and you have been in a public goods sector for a while, you've been building some real life programs, you can join and apply for the travel scholarships. We offer up to a 500 USD flight ticket reimbursement for those people who are actually doing things in the public goods sector. Yeah. And finally, we want to introduce some of our communities that we have been donating to. One of them is DeFi Hacks that I want to talk about. They are an open source security GitHub project that has over 5K GitHub stars. What they are basically doing is they are working through new contract developers over all the security problems. They basically reproduce all the contract attacks and trying to teach the new developers to avoid them, and using this GitHub repository. So they are basically attending a lot of the conferences in CTF, and has guided a lot of the developers through the process. So basically, I have quickly walked through what we have done, and we're going to the part 3, which I want to talk about more, and maybe this is where the major roasting happens. Okay, so first is about sustainability. The most question we were asked about is why should people care about public goods? So in often cases, public goods is more like a showcase to the general public that we're doing something good, we're doing something useful, and doing something meaningful to the public. But aside from that agenda, I think there is something more essential in this concept, which is like, I believe public goods is also a really important source of new users and new developers that can help us, the entire ecosystem thrive. So here's why. So when I was a student, I used to be a Web2 developer in the open source communities. I used to be in the Apache, I used to contribute to several of the Apache projects. When I was a student, I applied to one of the GSOC programs, and I just got selected into one of the programs, and that's where my journey in the open source world begins. The thing is that for most like the open source projects, it's because it's permissionless. Even when you are unexperienced, you don't have any prior knowledge, you can still find a way to get involved in those areas. You don't have to be a like experienced developer. You don't have to have a lot of connections, but in that case, you can already start doing something, building something in a permissionless fashion. And I think that's very important in the Web3 world because for users and builders in Web3 world, there is very thick line between them. So when we are talking about we want more new users, more adapters, what we're really talking about is we want more builders and more people who are using this technology, who understand this technology, and who can collaborate with us using this technology. And I think this is where the true value of public goods projects or the open source projects are, is that it lowers the bar of like general participation of the entire general people. No matter it's like a coding for, if it's an open source project, it can allow for like Web2 developers to get on board to the Web3 world easily. So if it's like a in real life community, for example, Pagoda, Edge City, Shanghai, and a lot of like the pop-up cities, Zuzalo, in which is going on right now in Chiang Mai, there offer an opportunity for those people who are not familiar with the Web3 world to get involved in this process. So I think this is a major part where the public goods is really not only just a fancy forefront of the Web3 world, but also a fundamental functioning sector of helping the entire system thrive. So this is where I want to talk about sustainability. Is like, why should people care about public goods? Not only because you want to, let people know, we are like a charity funding company, or we did a lot of good things, but what kind of good things, we don't know. But also, you can actually help gaining more users, developers, and adopters in this whole ecosystem. And that's where we're heading to. So just by quoting one of the Vitalik's articles recently, he says that we all should focus on the positive sum, which is like for all our like application builders, if we want to align with the Ethereum, there is something that we can do. So one of them is like you can contribute to open source technologies and commitment to donate a certain percentage of the tokens of your revenue to the Ethereum ecosystem-wide public goods. So what I think this underline means is that it's a long-term thing. It's not like you put into like 100 or 1,000 USD to a marketing program and you just instantly get like 100 more users. But this is more like, change a general view of the public and opening up new opportunities for them to get involved, and that's where we are heading to. And that's all about sustainability and why we should care about it. And the second part I want to talk about is like scoping. So there is a joke about public goods funding is that, so if you are a guy with a lot of money and someday you decide to say, I want to give out money to public goods. And then you will like magically find out that every project is saying we were public goods. What I'm trying to say is that public is really a vague definition. It has a lot of like meanings, and it's intrinsically it's like an economic term that is not very easy to understand. It's very like professional, and it has a lot of like restrictions. So when we were talking about public goods and we were referring them to introducing this concept to new users, so we'll say, yeah, you talk a lot, but what is it really? So that's a question we have been facing for a long time. So there is just so many things that's remotely related to public goods. So we don't have the ability and the effort and the capability to like funding all of them. So scoping is really important. So which exact part of public goods funding are we funding, and what are we supporting, and do we believe is the most important part? So there are some like preferences in GCC selection. So the first one is we prefer infrastructure, as we mentioned earlier, because we found it's really useful for not only just the coding communities, but also the general real life communities. The second part is like open source software, of course, because we found it's like easily the most qualified definition of public goods. And third, it was like we focus on long-term impact, and of course, if if we focus on the first two, we naturally like wants to focus on the long-term effect. And the third part of like the interesting thing about public funding is like impact measuring. So every metric comes with a bias in public funding. So it depends on how you want to like evaluate them. So for an open source project, you can have like you can evaluate it on active contributors. You can evaluate on like GitHub stars. You can evaluate on the lines of codes and the events happening on the GitHub. But that all comes up with a bias. I mean, this is a neutral word, the bias. It's, each bias stands for a set of rules or criterion that how you want to like give scores to this public projects. And the best way we can do is like, okay, we just can't avoid this. It's just not avoidable. We have to live with it, and what we can only do is like to try to improve it and accept it and announce to our like the audiences, say, okay, I know we're not perfect, but we're trying our best to like do this. So currently, GCC is still like in a very committee style thing. So you just have a bunch of voters, which we call the voting committee, and we're using some like QF and signal booster like voting strategies. If you're not familiar with them, they're just like some tricks that you can make the voting weight more reasonable. That's what we're doing. And aside from that, there is something I really want to share that I just recently observed is the RPGF4. They have adopted a new voting mechanism, which is like instead of like voting directly on each individual projects, they're actually letting the voters to choose what metrics do you prefer. So this is really interesting because you do not like give a rate to each individual projects, but like you can choose and explicitly express your preferences over the metrics. For example, I give a weight of 10 to the GitHub stars. I give a weight of 5 to the active contributors. And based on those criteria you selected, and then you will have like a computed list of rank of all those projects. And since you don't even have the original data of each of the individual projects, the result is completely like hidden, but it's also very reasonable because once you choose the metrics, the rank is like determined. So this is a very good way for you to explicitly say, we have bias, but this is our bias, and this is how we are going to measure things. And that avoids a lot of problems, but I won't dive in too much on that. So basically, I have covered some of my observations and some of the complaints and some of the highlights of our past year's work. So here's about what we are going to do next. Okay, we're going to have a GCCD during DevCon. I think it's on 10th November. We haven't announced it yet, but it's coming out really soon. We're also collaborating with some of the Chinese open source communities. They're totally Web2 based, basically. We're trying to collecting some like the cases where open source technologies or best practices are deployed into the real world life cases. I want to demonstrate them in a conference that's happening in China, Beijing. I think it's also in November as well. So that's some things we're doing right now. So also, if you want to get involved, you can always recommend or you just like apply to our grants program, and you can find our grants application entry on this website. Also, if you want to co-host events, want to have a speech, want to like to share some thoughts, just please contact us and we can co-host events everywhere and during DevCon. Also, you can follow us on Twitter, and there were a lot of like new informations on our program and then on our grantees. And finally, this is a QR code of our Telegram channels, and that's all. Thanks so much. Thanks.